Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
When Johnny Cash walked into this prison, he didn't just sing psalms, he changed lives. And what happened inside those walls that day still sends chills down people's spines more than 50 years later. It's hard to imagine now, but there was a time when the idea of a famous singer walking into one of the toughest prisons in America seemed unthinkable, dangerous, reckless. But that's exactly what Johnny Cash did, and the story of why he did it and how the prisoners reacted is something you'll carry with you long after you hear it. The place was California's Folsom State Prison, a fortress of gray granite that opened in 1880. It was the first prison in the state, built to hold the so-called worst of the worst. The stone for its massive walls was quarried right there on the grounds by the inmates themselves. Life inside was brutal. The cells were cramped and cold, the days were filled with back-breaking labor, and punishments were swift and harsh. For most men sent there, hope was a luxury they no longer allowed themselves to have. But over the decades, something unexpected crept into Folsom. Music. It started small, a harmonica in the yard, a battered guitar passed from hand to hand. By the 1950s, the prison even allowed inmate bands and occasional concerts in the mess hall. For men who had lost almost everything, music became the one thing they could still call their own. And here's the part that will surprise you. The prisoners weren't just entertained, they were healed, at least for a few minutes. Johnny Cash understood that. He'd grown up poor in the cotton fields of Arkansas, where the rhythm of work and the whistle of distant trains formed the soundtrack of his boyhood. In 1953, while serving in the U.S. Air Force in Germany, he saw a movie called Inside the Walls of Folsom Prison. The gritty realism stuck with him, and not long after, he wrote a song from the point of view of a prisoner hearing a train outside and longing for freedom. That song became Folsom Prison Blues. The song was a hit, but Cash always said he wanted to sing it inside a real prison. He believed the men there would understand it better than anyone else. In 1957, he got his first chance, performing at Huntsville State Prison in Texas. The connection was instant. The men listened with an intensity Cash had never felt from any other audience. Over the next decade, he returned to prisons again and again, singing about regret, love, pain, and redemption. By January 1968, Johnny Cash's own life had been through storms. Years of drug addiction and a career slump had nearly ended him. But with the help of June Carter, he was finding his way back. And one of the first things he wanted to do was sing for prisoners again. That cold January morning, Cash, June, guitarist Luther Perkins, bassist Marshall Grant, and the Statler brothers walked through Folsom's gates. Guards eyed them carefully, escorting them past towers, gates, and stone walls into the prison's dining hall, which had been transformed into a makeshift concert space. The inmates, some in for life, shuffled in, wearing their denim blues, curious to see if this country star would really understand them. At 9:40 a.m., Johnny Cash stepped onto the stage. No big introduction, just that deep voice saying, "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash." The room erupted. Then came the opening chords of Folsom Prison Blues, and when he reached the line, "I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die," the place exploded in cheers, laughter, and applause. They weren't celebrating the crime, they were celebrating the honesty. Cash didn't just sing to them, he talked to them. He joked about the bad coffee, teased the guards, and even took song requests. He played Dark as a Dungeon, 25 Minutes to Go, and a brand new song called Greystone Chapel, written by Glenn Shirley, an inmate sitting in the audience. Shirley could hardly believe it as Cash's voice filled the room with his own words. Some inmates would later say, Those 57 minutes were the first time in years they felt like human beings again. The whole thing was recorded, and when At Folsom Prison was released, it didn't just climb the charts. It became one of the most legendary live albums in music history. But for the men who were there, it was never about Billboard rankings. It was about being seen. Cash would go on to perform at San Quentin and other prisons, earning the nickname the Man in Black. He said he wore black for the poor, the beaten, the victims of war, and the prisoner who has long paid for his crime. He carried that mission until the end of his life. The legacy of that day in 1968 is still felt. Music became a permanent part of rehabilitation programs at Folsom. Glenn Shirley was eventually released, though his story had its own tragic ending. And maybe that's why we still talk about it. Because deep down, we all want to believe there's still hope for us, no matter where we are or what we've done. Johnny Cash's Folsom concert wasn't a stunt. It wasn't a publicity trick. It was a message that compassion can reach through steel bars, that music, in the right hands, can set people free, even if just for a song or two. And that's the story of the day a man in black walked into a prison and left behind something far more powerful than music.